Now, Manchester City achieved a feat that only one club had ever achieved before in the world of English football. It won the treble after beating up on Inter Milan in that very interesting game that was played in Istanbul. And of course, big congratulations to Manchester City and that man, Pep Guardiola, the man who orchestrated that victory for Manchester City, as they certainly got what they have always been longing for in front of their owner, that is Sheikh Mansour, who has only watched 2 of Manchester City games. So that is a big achievement, and to be honest, no hard feelings, hand clap. They deserved it, they worked for it, and big respect to Pep and his entire team. But after that win, of course, some football people have come up to starting to trying to compare this Manchester City treble to what Manchester United won in 1999. And now, for me, that's where I pick a bone. And I'm thinking probably these are not football people, and that's why I'm here. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video. This is probably the longest video or the longest live I will ever make, but I think it is worth it because people have got to understand why there is only one Sir Alex Ferguson and why after that 1999 season he was knighted by the Queen of England. Subscribe to the channel. This is the hot spot. We are here to compare Manchester United and Man City trebles. The question is, who is king? Which one is king? That's the conversation we are having, and you can as well let in anyone you know about. You will have to go into the comment section as well if you want to give your opinion on this topic. But for me, I'm here. I know we've all followed the Manchester City season, how they came into the season, how they prepared for the season, signing Erling Haaland, and how they were given a run for their money by Arsenal. But only, I think, you never felt at any one point that really Man City would fail to win the Premier League. I think it was always theirs to lose, but Arsenal gave them a good run and eventually they won it. The FA Cup final, they beat up on Manchester United. Again, I wouldn't say it was that convincing of a win, really. I think United surprised, whereas we all expected the result to be that. I think the performance of United did subscribe many people, given how far ahead Manchester City has been ahead of United lately. Inter Milan, same thing. Is probably for me the worst Manchester City game I've seen in terms of how they were playing with pressure and all. But the most important thing is they won the game. But was their treble anywhere close to what Manchester United achieved way back in 1999? Let me know what you think, and I will be reading comments. I will be taking calls if I can, but that is the conversation we do want to get into. We do want to proper understand. Now, I'm going to start by, like I said, this is going to be the biggest video I'll make, or the longest video I'll make, but it's worth it. So I'll start by taking you back, now to Manchester United and how things were in 1999. The 1997, before 1998-1999 season, the season before the 1997-98 season, Manchester United had a bad season by their standards, by all standards. United finished second in the Premier League. That was behind Arsenal. That is how they finished. They did not win a single trophy. At that time, some of their key players were not happy with the club. They were losing key players. For example, that man, Gary Pallister, he was out of the club. He left Manchester United at the end of the 1997-98 season. He's one of those who left. I think he crossed over to Middlesbrough. Then, the same season, he was a key player for the team. He left and joined Middlesbrough. Then another key player in the team, that is that man, Brian McClare, also left the team at the same time, end of the season. He also left the team, that forward right there. He did leave Manchester United. So Sir Alex Ferguson came into the 1998-99 season with issues to sort. In fact, when those two left, United was as if trying to reorganize and try to rebuild and try, because Arsenal at that time was at their Arsenal best. In fact, I do recall coming into that season, the first time United met Arsenal, Arsenal had beaten us in the past 3 consecutive games with Arsene Wenger. They were unplayable. So after the 1997-98 season, Sir Alex Ferguson, like the smart guy he has always been, he made changes and he made recruitments. He went all the way to PSV Eindhoven, and he signed a little-known footballer, one footballer who I think many of you had not thought about, to come in and come in the centre back and replace Pallister. That's the man, Jaap Stam. He's the guy he brought in from PSV Eindhoven. By then, it was for a world record fee for him, by the way. And then he also brought in a striker, a little-known striker. Remember, at that time, United was playing with Andy Cole, Teddy Sheringham was there, and of course, Oregana Sosha. They were never the marquee strikers, but there was this emerging striker at Aston Villa called Dwight York. He also brought him in, still for a record fee. That is how he dealt with the departure. The 1998 season, 98-99. Now I'm taking you through this history to paint perspective for people to get an idea of how that season was for Manchester United. For those who are not there and you're just jumping around, I want you to understand why exactly Sir Alex, he was knighted after that season. Why the Queen herself knighted Sir Alex Ferguson. So this is him reorganizing the team after the previous bad season they had without winning a trophy. It was a pressure season. United at that time, I mean, they were exchanging titles between them and Arsenal. It was a case of Arsene Wenger and Sir Alex Ferguson. So Arsenal beats us in the previous season. United finishes second. No trophy at all. You're losing your best players. Even Peter Schmeichel, I do recall, put in a transfer request. He was later convinced to stay until the end of the 1998-99 season. So the senior players in United were all tired. Schmeichel had been at United for 7 years. They were tired. He wanted to go to Sporting Lisbon. Imagine, of all clubs, saying, this United thing is not working properly now. But when he stayed, Sir Alex Ferguson was slowly but surely putting his house in order. Now, I'm going to take you through how United won the Premier League, the English Premier League, how United won the FA Cup, and how they won the UEFA Champions League. I'm just going to take you slowly but surely because I do want people to appreciate to understand why exactly the feat that Manchester United achieved way back in 1999 was a very, very, very extremely impressive feat. That's the season. At the end of that season, that was Sir Alex Ferguson being knighted by the Queen herself, rest in peace. That is him. But why? You need to understand. I'm waiting to see whether even Pep Guardiola is going to be knighted. But again, that's not for me to decide. But I'm painting a picture. Let's continue. So, United, Sir Alex Ferguson signs Jaap Stam, the Dutchman, and the striker Dwight York. Then, at the same time, Manchester United, one of the best players for United at that time, or probably the best players in the world at that time, was David Beckham. But David Beckham was coming from a terrible World Cup, the 1998 World Cup. If you recall what happened in the 1998 World Cup, what happened to David Beckham when he was shown a red card. If you recall, when he was shown a red card by I think it was not Colina. He was shown a red card in a World Cup game against Argentina. I think he committed a bad foul on Diego Simeone, the current coach of Atletico Madrid. And Beckham was shown a red card. It was an important game for England. So Beckham at that time had become a public enemy in English football. Everyone in English football hated David Beckham. I'm telling you, he was one of the most important players for Man United at the time. But the season started, that season started on a bad slate for him because everyone in the UK did not want him. They did not want to see him. Why? Because of how he had cost them a game with the red card he got. Whenever he was playing with Manchester United, whenever he caught the ball, he was booed. That was him in that incident. That is the 1998 FIFA World Cup. If you recall again, I think that was France 98. Yeah, that World Cup was eventually won by France. So, I'm showing you the things Sir Alex Ferguson had to deal with before the season, before the season was starting. Losing key players, your best player was not well prepared. You are signing new players to add on to your team. I think at the time when he brought Dwight York, for example, as a striker, the key striker for United was Andy Cole. So they were just reorganizing. Of course, Roy Keane was there in the midfield. There was Paul Scholes. There were the two key midfielders. This is the lineup United was using for the most part of of that season. The typical 4-4-2, the traditional 4-4-2 that Sir Alex Ferguson used to like. You can see. So he brought in Jaap Stam. He brought in Dwight York to come and boost the attack. So behind were those four. Typical natural number 7, David Beckham was playing a number 7. Ryan Giggs was playing number 11. Gary Neville on the right, Owen on the left, and of course the centre back Jaap Stam was the man brought in to bolster that back line for United. And these were the reserves there. As you see, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Teddy Sheringham, Phil Neville, Nick Butt, Blankvist, some names you can even forget. You might not even recall some of the players they had. So those were exactly the reserves. But the key reserves, I think, as you imagine, Wes Brown was young at that time. I think was about 18 or 19. He was a young player. I remember Sir Alex Ferguson praising him when he came in and tried to manage some of the big games there, because football at that time was a pressure game. Arsenal was unplayable at that time. Arsenal was a very unplayable team at the time. So Sir Alex Ferguson had to reorganize himself. So we come into the season, the 1998-99 season, there was not so much expectation, to be honest, that United would win not just the Premier League, but also later on go on to win a treble. It was so unexpected. If you compare to the Manchester situation from last season, I don't know, you can have your opinion. Again, guys, this is a comparison, but because I know the performance of Man City is fresh in our minds, I want to rely more on what Sir Alex Ferguson and Man United did when they were winning the treble, the manner in which they won the treble, how difficult and how important, how impactful that treble was on football in England, and why actually he was knighted. So we move on. So that season for Manchester United went 30. Just to fast forward, just as I want to take you back, bring you forward as well, as I try to paint a clear picture of that season. In that season, Manchester United lost only 5 games. There was one game they lost in the Charity Shield against Arsenal. That's one game they lost. They did not lose a game in the Champions League. They lost 3 games in the league. That's Manchester United, and they lost in the League Cup to Spurs, who went on to win it actually that season. So those were the only 5 games Manchester United lost in that season. But I'm telling you how the season began for them. Now the first games for United in that season were very difficult games. They were very difficult games. Besides power blacking out in one of the games, at Old Trafford, there was a power blackout. That's how bad the season was. But the opening game was against Leicester City, and I do recall United going down in 15 minutes. United was down by 2 goals in that opening game of the season, because the system, like I told you, I gave you a background of how before pre-season how United was looking. So the first games were always going to be difficult for them. So the first game comes, and Manchester United loses. Rather, it goes down in 15 minutes. They go down to Leicester City. But it was, a few minutes later, rather later in the game, that goals came through. I think it was from David Beckham, and I should have been the second goal should have been from I think Beckham scored both of the goals. My memory is not serving me right, but Beckham was key in that game. But United salvaged the point in that one, and it ended 2-2. That's the first game of the season. So United labored, kind of struggled in the first games. In fact, the first win for United in that season came. It was a 4-1 to Charlton Athletic. That was the first win of the season in the Premier League for Manchester United. So it was a difficult opening weeks for Manchester United. But later on, patiently, things started working out. Things started getting in shape and getting in order for Manchester United. So they started winning games, but still not consistently, because they were struggling. Also, at the same time, whereas they were struggling with all the psychological issues they had and the bug that comes with new signings, at the same time, there was a situation of a proposed takeover by Sky B to take over Manchester United. But fans were protesting it. They didn't want it. So even away, in terms of ownership of the club, things were not okay. Things were not that settled. So there was pressure from the fans. They were protesting and stuff. So the whole situation for United was difficult, as if what you see now, probably even worse. What you see now with United and the ownership scandal, of course, the scenario was a bit different the other time, but the whole idea is they were not a settled club. So Old Trafford had a lot of issues. No wonder we're even seeing power blackouts happen at Old Trafford, one of the biggest stadiums in the world. So again, that was again United for you. I'm trying to show you how things were for Manchester United at the start of that season. Guys, continue to share this link as you subscribe, because I do want us to settle this conversation, and I do want it to be a conversation we have together. So that was a wrap up of that season for Manchester United. They won the charity they only lost five games. Charity Shield against Arsenal, the League Cup versus Tottenham. They were beaten 3 times in the Premier League, and they went 33 games unbeaten in that season. But you have a background of how it all started. It was not all simple and rosy for them. So let's now move on to how they won. I've sort of summarized for you the season, because that's the season Manchester United became the kings of comebacks. That's the season Ole Gunnar Solskjaer became probably the one player who made substitutes believe and feel and know and understand that even a substitute is an important player, because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer became the most impactful player for Man United, I think, after David Beckham, but for the most part coming from the bench, Solskjaer, in that season. But also in that same season, United made a name for their late comebacks. That's why they became the kings of comebacks. But their late comebacks, they were coming back late in games. But let's now get to dissect the cups and the titles they won and how they came. The Premier League, starting off with the Premier League. So Man United, like I said, they had a slow start in the English Premier League. The first convincing result, which later became a Premier League classic, was an 8-1 thumping of Nottingham Forest. They beat Nottingham Forest by 8-1, and in that game, I think Solskjaer came off the bench to score 4 goals in that one. That was one of the first major victories that United had that was quite convincing. But they were still struggling. For example, in the whole month of December, United won only 1 game. Well, that was on Boxing Day. That's the game they beat Nottingham Forest. That's the only 1 game they won. Arsenal was putting them under a lot of pressure. Arsenal was leading the table for the most part of the season. Remember, there were new signings up front. United was playing a typical 4-4-2, meaning they were relying on both of their strikers. So Sir Alex Ferguson had to buy some bit of time for the partnership, for the duo for not only, of course, David Beckham and Cole, who in that picture I'll tell you how they scored the goals that won the title. They are the ones who won the title, the Premier League title, in that game against Spurs when they came from behind on the final day. But that will be at the end. Let me go back to the pairing of the 2 strikers. That's Dwight York, who was new, and Andy Cole. So the 2 had not yet properly jailed together, so they needed time. It was later on in October that they had started. The pair had started to work. Remember, they were the starting teams for Sir Alex Ferguson. They were the starting pair for Sir Alex Ferguson. So it was always going to be important for them to be performing and playing well. If United are going to compete at that time to win a Premier League title, you must have had strikers, or a striker who would guarantee you, at least 20 goals a season or 25 goals a season. Football was more about the strikers. Strikers were so important at the time. So it was so important that duo, the pair of Andy Cole and Dwight York, did work out. So later on in October, it started to pick up. Like I told you, Solskjaer was being Solskjaer. He made records in that 8-1 win. They beat Nottingham Forest. United set a 20-year-old record for the biggest away win. It was an away game at Nottingham, the biggest away win in the Premier League. That record stood for, I think, more than 20 or 19 years. So again, these are records being set, but you've got the background of how this season started. So Manchester United did not come into a season the way Man City came into this season as clearly the best team in the world, and probably each game they went into, they were the favorites. United were underdogs, I think, for many of the games, for the many of the competitive games they won. Again, let's go on. So fast forward, we go on to May. We get into May. After the struggles, of course, they were picking up results here and there. I remember we went to face Arsenal, but Arsenal had beaten us 3 times consecutively in the past games we had met, and it was a very difficult place. You actually felt it that Manchester United was certainly going to be beaten. Was going to be beaten whenever they were to meet Arsenal, because Arsenal was so good, was way ahead of us at that time. But somehow, for some reason, the team manages to scrape through and get moments where we're leading the table. At that time, that man Roy Keane was, I think, at his peak in terms of anger. He was always, I think he got the most red cards in his career in that season, probably, or the most impactful cards, or in crucial games. I will tell you one in the Champions League and the FA Cup against Arsenal and all. So he was always off. The tempers were flaring. Football was heated up at that time. Winning a treble at that time was very difficult because the world had some of the best players. I don't even want to first go yet to outside England, what players Juventus had, or Barcelona, or Bayern Munich, or Real Madrid and what have you. But in the UK alone, Arsenal at that time had Dennis Bergkamp. They had Nicolas Anelka. These were Patrick Vieira, of course. These were hot players playing at their prime. They like Thierry. I think yes, Thierry had come. So the Arsenal team was unplayable. It was unplayable. That is why games between Arsenal, and that's when the games between Arsenal and Man United were so tough, at their prime toughest. They were like battles and wars and stuff. So it was a very difficult season for Manchester United. So as Sir Alex Ferguson, slowly but surely, is managing the team, somehow building something. Yeah? And it reached a point, excuse me. It reached a point and you felt like it started working. It was beginning to work. So the fans were now beginning to believe that actually Man United can go on and win. So fast forward to May, Manchester United, after a power blackout in January at Old Trafford, United actually went on and topped for the first time. United was on top of the Premier League table for the first time in January. So United even made a record in that season, becoming the first team to reach 60 points in the Premier League. Again, it was a very surprising thing, a very surprising achievement at that time, because again, like I was told you, it was Sir Alex Ferguson was just patching up a team. You didn't think they were ready, they were there yet. So actually, I have a feeling that after they won the treble, they sort of relaxed, because I believe had they concentrated more, they should have even kept winning it, because they had more time together. But again, things are beginning to happen for Manchester United. So fast forward to May, Beckham and Andy Cole do save Manchester United in the final game of the season. Man U came into that game. They were toe to toe together with Arsenal, because Arsenal were going to play. I think it was Aston Villa. Man United had to win the game. United had to win their game against Tottenham Hotspur. They had to win that game against Spurs. Guess what happens? Les Ferdinand puts Spurs forward in the early minutes of the game, and it looked like it was gone. It looked like it was clear. It was going. Now the title was going Arsenal's way. Remember, Arsenal had won it the season before. Arsenal had won it in the previous season. So it was always going to be a painful one if they had gone on to add on a second with United there watching. So they had to beat Tottenham Hotspur. It was a tougher game, because certainly between Aston Villa and Tottenham Hotspur, who at that time were even League Cup winners, it was always going to be difficult. But guess what happens? David Beckham and Andy Cole team up to ensure that United does get a win in that game. And ended 2-1, and boom, Manchester United wins the title that season. That was the table. They won with 79 points. Arsenal was second with 78 points. At the death, that is how Manchester United won the Premier League in the 1990 season. In that season, it was, I think, one of the most exciting seasons that I think the history of the Premier League, because the manner in which it was won, the manner in which in which Manchester United dealt with the pressure, dealt with everything that was falling at them, was something hitherto unseen. So it was a very, very important season. It was a very important victory for Man U, and I believe that is the victory that psyched the players up to go ahead and achieve even more. That's what I believe. But these two players had already jailed now together. That's Andy Cole and Dwight York. They had already jailed together, and now they were becoming the new duo in town, the new duo in world football in terms of scoring goals. So already Sir Alex Ferguson was attracting attention in terms of the things he did, how he managed to achieve that. Now we haven't even got to the FA Cup. So that's the Premier League, and these are the two. That's the game. That's the image from that game where David Beckham. I think it's after that they made the movie, Made It Like Beckham, because I don't know. I think whatever happened with him, the World Cup in 1998, just I think psyched him up because he had a brilliant season. He even went on to become the best UEFA player, second in the Ballon d'Or. And at that time, the world of football had the likes of Rivaldo. Rivaldo won the Ballon d'Or that year, 98, 99. They had the hottest footballers at that time, Zinedine Zidane. Man, it was a difficult period. But David Beckham we are seeing him swinging in crosses for fun. That's the season everyone started wanting to bend it like Beckham. I think it was more evident. He was always there, but the focus was more on him in that season and in the Premier League, because it was the most watched league in the world. I think it is one of the most exciting football seasons we've had in the history of the game. So that is the Premier League. Now, again, guys, I'm going to now move on. I told you this is going to be a long live, and I'm going to move on to the FA Cup and try to also give you a picture of how they won the FA Cup. So for me, when it comes to the Premier League, I think it is clear that Manchester United's winning of the Premier League was a lot more difficult than Man City's Premier League title that they won this past season. Nothing against City, no disrespect, but I think we can agree when it comes to that clearly, if you go down memory lane, that Premier League season was intense. Man United was coming from issues. It was everything around United was tough, but they played and punched above their weight and won. And remember, they were playing with mostly the class of 92. This is when the class of 1992 made sense. That is when the whole class of 92 made sense. Let's go to the FA Cup. So, Manchester City's FA Cup victory is one you respect, no disrespect. They did win the FA Cup and they deserved to win it, deservedly so. And certainly huge credit and kudos to them. But going back to 1999, the FA Cup that Manchester United won and the manner in which they won it. Manchester United played only in the FA Cup en route to their victory. They only played one non-Premier League club, that was Fulham. I don't want to go on justifying how Fulham was quite difficult and unplayable at the time, because you will say, now I'm putting all forms of excuses. Okay, it was Fulham, it wasn't in the Premier League. But the other teams they played that season in the FA Cup included Liverpool. They played Middlesbrough. Man United played Middlesbrough. They played Liverpool in the 4th round in an interesting game where they came from behind again. Michael Owen going forward and United coming back late. Again, David Beckham had everything to do in that game. They bounced back, United, and they win that game by 2-1. First went down to Liverpool. Actually, it was one. Michael Owen put Liverpool ahead in the first half. In the last minutes of the game, in the 86th minute, the dying minutes of the game, Dwight York scored, and Sosha, I think York scored from a cross, I think from David Beckham, and then Sosha, in the 2nd minute of stoppage time, who had come on by the substitute, scored the winning goal, and United won that one by 2-1. That was the comeback at Liverpool, a famous comeback in 1992. Those who followed Man United, who have followed Man United, know a lot about that title and rather that comeback. It is one of the best comebacks, I think, in the history of Man United. And again, it was continuing to cement how Man United and Sir Alex Ferguson were now being the kings of comebacks. It was beginning to cement that positioning. So, again, that same FA Cup, after disposing of Liverpool, Manchester United played in the in the quarterfinal. I think played Chelsea, beat Chelsea, and in this Manchester United played Arsenal as well in that FA Cup. And at that time, this was another interesting one. At that time, that FA Cup final used to be played if you went if you played to a stalemate after 90 minutes, you went into extra time, and if you still went into a stalemate, you had a replay. That's exactly what happened. So it was a very dramatic one because it was played twice. First of all, red card to Roy Keane. If you remember that very infamous red card where he kicked, was it Vieira who he kicked from the ground? That was the game. Roy Keane again was being Roy Keane, crazy at that time, so hot-tempered, and he was actually costing United, games. The captain was costing the team a lot of games because of his temper and cards that he kept getting. So again, Roy Keane in that one was red carded in the first leg, and Man United played the last 30 minutes of that game with 10 men, but they went on and held on and into extra time and stuff, and that game ended goalless. 4 days later, and that goalless game, by the way, was also very dramatic because Anelka scored the winning goal and it was cancelled. Nicolas Anelka, he was a hot striker at the time for Arsenal. His goal was cancelled. Then I think that's the one still where Peter Schmeichel saved a penalty from Dennis Bergkamp. Yeah. So we go into the second leg, and still the same thing happens, and United disposes of Arsenal. Of course, fast forward, not to drag on it so much. So United disposes of Arsenal in the second leg. In fact, after that game, that was the last time FA Cup games were played over 2 legs if you play to a draw. From that time, it was the last time that ever happened, because it was very difficult. It was a very painful experience, I think, for a United fan. If you were there at the time and you watched that game, it was so painful. I think football just reviewed and they said this is not happening again. I think there were heartbreaks. It was almost compared to that goal that used to be scored at the death. Like whoever scores first after extra time, whoever scores first, the game ends. I think that game could have killed quite a number of people with heartbreak and stuff. So that rule was changed. So starting the next season, FA Cup games started being played going into penalties. If you went, after 90 minutes going into extra time, it was still goalless, or you're drawing your level, there is no playing again a replay after a few days. That's when it last happened. So that was how dramatic the FA Cup was. So they go on to the final and win it, and United win the FA Cup. That is how difficult it was. I don't think you can say exactly the same thing about Manchester City's FA Cup title. No disrespect, but yeah, they actually, in terms of all the other teams that played in the FA Cup, you probably feel Manchester City played tougher opponents. But would you think the opponents they faced were tougher than the opponents that Manchester United faced at the time? I want to pick your mind. I would be interested to pick your mind on that. But I don't think so. I think the FA Cup final victory for Manchester United was a tougher FA Cup final. Title. The FA Cup title was a tougher one. The one of Manchester United was a tougher one than Manchester City's was this past season. Again, trying to build to why Sir Alex Ferguson became knighted immediately after that season, because the things he was achieving were unbelievable. Let's move on to the Champions League. Guys, again, continue subscribing and sharing the link so that people get to get a proper side of this debate. If you have people out there who are debating and arguing about this and who the best is and all, you've got to have this information so that you can go on and challenge them, because it's really a painful debate that's going on, and for people who've been there around watching football, I think we need to settle it all at once. Now let's get to the UEFA Champions League. So the UEFA Champions League was again another interesting one, because Manchester United was pitted in a tough group. United was in Group B, which was immediately after the draws were released. Everyone would tell that this was the group of death. Those were the teams in the group. It had Bayern Munich. It had, of course, United, FC Barcelona, and Brøndby. I think Brøndby was the easier one in that game. To show you how difficult that game was, because United was way bit behind, was a little behind in Europe compared to Bayern and Manchester United and Barcelona, with whom they were in the groups. To give you a clear reason why that was so, let me show you how the games went, how those games went in the groups. Manchester United, in the 6 games played in that group, they failed to beat Barcelona and Madrid over the 2 legs, so 4 games were draws, and they only salvaged victories against Brøndby. The easier one is the one they beat. They beat Brøndby by 4, I think, but over the 2 legs. They disposed them off badly to get 6 points, and the other 4 points from the 4 draws. The 2 at Old Trafford and Camp Nou, and the draws at the Allianz Arena and Old Trafford. So those are the 4 points. So United got 10 points, and they finished second in that group behind Bayern Munich. So they failed to beat Bayern in the group stages. It is the same team they were destined to meet in the final from the same group. But it was a very, very difficult group for United. But they managed to go on and make it out of the group. So they go into the quarterfinals of that competition. And let me try to get for you the teams they faced in the quarterfinal and how they performed. In the quarterfinal, United was facing 2 Italian teams. Now, if you know football, you know. If you watched the game last night, you understand why Italian teams are historically not easy. You saw how Manchester City were made to work for their game. But it was a very, very difficult place to be, having to play 2 Italian teams. That was, they played Inter Milan at the quarterfinals, and they played Juventus in the semi. No walkovers, no easy games. Again, bring in Man City. For me, if you ask me, en route their final victory, their final in the Champions League, I think the hardest team, I think all of us only had faith or hope in Real Madrid to stop them. The only hard team they played, I think, to be honest, was Real Madrid, which they actually turned out to be the easiest win for them. They easily won that one. But it was a very, 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 very difficult group for Manchester United. All road to the final for Manchester United. They were playing teams like Inter Milan, and that's the team. That's the route to the final. So they play Inter Milan in the quarterfinals. They beat them out. Dwight York was the star in that one. Scored both goals in the first leg. Then again, United plays Inter Milan, of course, in the return leg. It draws 1-0, goal scored by Paul Scholes. And then in the semi-final, United is facing Juventus. Now, that was another interesting one. Again, another comeback. This time, Giggs is scoring the second minute of added time. Juventus takes the lead, and Ryan Giggs, in the 92nd minute, pulls matters level to make it 1-1 in the first game at Old Trafford. Then the return game, away from Old Trafford, United needed to either draw 2-2 or win that one. What happens? United goes behind. Filippo Inzaghi puts Juventus ahead. That's super people. If you remember him, the Italian legend. He puts them ahead. Then, just when you thought things are done, guess what? Roy Keane pulls one back, and then Dwight York pulls another in the 34th minute. And Andy Cole, in the late minutes of the game, 84th minute, scores a winner. For him to end 3-2, United is in the final. Do you see how difficult? Look at that road in the Champions League, that road to the final for Manchester United, and how difficult it was. At that time, the players, I told you of some of the best players in the world. The best players in the world were at their prime at that time. The best players in the world were at their prime at that time in all clubs. So it was a very, very difficult and extremely difficult period, Champions League, for Manchester United. Can you say the same on the route leading to the final for Manchester City No disrespect, but I don't think Manchester City played an Inter Milan. I don't think they played a Juventus from the times. I don't think so. I don't think they had a hot Bayern and Barcelona in the group stages. That shows you how tough. Bearing in mind how the entire season started for them. Big achievement, isn't it? And big stars being made. David Beckham was swinging in crosses for fun. David Beckham became, I think, the most accurate swing of crosses with his free kicks. Solskjaer became something else. Man United were making a brand. They were creating a brand like never before. Even non-United supporters would rush to watch United games. This man Beckham, that was his best season. And I think for me, that's when I just said, I mean, this guy is special. Because he was competing, he was matching with the best players, the Rivaldos of Brazil, who went on to win the Ballon d'Or of this time. It was a very difficult time for anyone to try and match some of the best players in the world. Now we go into the final, and this is where, again, more magic happened in the final. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, a substitute, and that was the United squad that played almost the entire season. There were issues with United going into that final. Roy Keane, the two starting central midfielders for United were not there in the game. Roy Keane and Paul Scholes were both not in the game. Roy Keane was suspended. Paul Scholes, I think, was injured as well. He was not in the game. So Sir Alex Ferguson was going to face Bayern Munich. The team he failed to beat with both of these players in the group over 2 legs in the group stages was the same team he was meeting in the final. This time without Roy Keane, the captain. No, he wasn't the captain at the time. Schmeichel was. Without Roy Keane and without Paul Scholes. Two of their most important in such a final. Put yourself in Sir Alex Ferguson's shoes. What do? You don't have Roy Keane in such a final, and you don't have Paul Scholes. Very difficult place. Imagine Man City coming into that final, and okay, let's keep it against Inter Milan, but the opponent was a tougher opponent than Inter Milan. So both of your best midfielders are suspended. What do you do? How do you handle that one? Sir Alex Ferguson, the creative Ferguson, comes up with a masterpiece. Again, such a manager, character of a manager. He had a player called Blomqvist. I would even struggle to pronounce that name. I would struggle to recall how many games Blomqvist leading to that time he had played for United. So he paired him with Nick Butt. These were the two reserve midfielders United had. In the same game, David Beckham came from the right wing and he added to the central midfield. He came in the central midfield, Beckham, and Ryan Giggs was inverted. He had been playing as a number 11, a traditional number 11 all throughout the season. This time he was inverted to play as the number 7. Can you imagine? It was a very difficult game. No wonder, just a few minutes, barely 10 minutes into the game, I think about 6 minutes into the game, Mario Basler puts Bayern forward in the lead. It became difficult. It became so difficult and intense. It was clear that Bayern were winning. After struggling to find goals, Sir Alex Ferguson says, okay, there is nothing to lose now. What do I do? He brings on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Teddy Sheringham. They come on as substitutes in that game. And like they say, the rest is history. Subscribe to the channel. And again, give me your opinion about these trophies, these titles, the manner in which they came. I've given you a history, a background of how Manchester United won their treble and how Manchester City's did happen. You've watched this, that's the beauty. Whether you were there in 1999 or not, at least I'm trying to paint for you a picture of how the season was, and also for you to understand why actually you might think the Queen was biased or the Queen was a Man United supporter and all. Why is it that of all people, the Queen knighted Sir Alex Ferguson and not every other coach who comes and wins titles and stuff? I want you to understand. I don't think the new king of England will knight Sir Pep Guardiola. I'll be surprised if they did. Not because he did not do well, but because he knows that the man of achievement, the nature of this achievement does not anywhere compare to what Sir Alex Ferguson achieved with his 1992 class and his players that was in 1999. There is no way. They were nowhere comparable. But also, the situation for both teams is totally different. The difference is day and night. That the Manchester United situation was so difficult that no one would have expected they would win a single title, not a double, and later on winning a treble, beating the nature of opponent and opponents they dealt with, the opposition they dealt with, but also revealing a lot of things about football, revealing how good a player David Beckham is, how important substitutes are, what they call impact substitutes. I remember after that season, Sir Alex Ferguson said clearly that he believed from that moment that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would make a coach, because even whenever he was at the bench all throughout that season, Ferguson rated Solskjaer as one of the most important players for United in that season, because on the bench he would sit and watch the game technically, and he would follow the game, and whenever he was brought on, he knew what to do. And I'm going to sum this up with the Champions League final against Bayern. And what exactly? Because that's the exact thing that happened in the Champions League final with Bayern. So it was a very difficult season. So like I said, Mario Basler puts Bayern forward in the final 6 minutes into the game. Ferguson later on, things are not happening. Colina, the referee, the famous Colina was the referee in that final. If you remember, the Italian who had interesting eyes. He was the referee. He pointed. The game was 1-0 until the final minutes of normal time. Then Colina added 3 minutes in that game. 3. People can complain and say they cheated for Manchester United. They added them many minutes. It was only 3 minutes that were added. But it was the 2 substitutions Sir Alex Ferguson made and David Beckham who won, combined to win that final, to lift that final for Manchester United. David Beckham, in the last minute of the game, the last 3 minutes of the game, Man United gets a corner. Peter Schmeichel comes from the goal to also try and head the ball in, try to get an equalizer. Swings it in. David Beckham, I think it was fluffed around, and it somehow lands on Teddy Sheringham, and bang, Sheringham puts it in. It's a 1-0. But the winning goal, which is the most remembered goal, and because again the world always remembers the winner or the one who scores the winning goal. The world will always remember Rodri for what he did yesterday, for the goal he scored for Man City yesterday. But the Teddy Sheringham scored the equalizer. Still, in an almost similar manner, a few minutes after the equalizer, again Man United gets another corner. Just to show you the pressure they were putting on this Bayern team. Man United gets another corner, and what happens? Same thing. Beckham swings it in. It is fluffed around. It goes on to Teddy Sheringham. Somehow it lands on the foot of Sheringham. I think he hits a shot, goes through the legs of some Bayern defender there, and it lands. It sort of deflects on the foot of an unmarked Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who taps in easy. And bang, it's done. I think the game was not restarted. That was done. It was the end of it. Manchester United wins their treble. In that manner, Manchester United wins their treble. It's done. So you can imagine how difficult it was for United to win. Can you compare the same manner, the pain they went through, the comebacks, the struggles before the season to what Manchester City had and with Pep Guardiola, with this oil money and all? I don't think so. So for me, to give my verdict, I think without a shadow of a doubt, Manchester City has done a tremendously good job. We probably saw this coming. Many could have thought it could have come even earlier. I think they had better teams. The David Silva, Yaya Toure team, Sergio Aguero team was for me far better than this. They failed to achieve it. They kept on investing, and take nothing away from them, because that's where the game has gone. When you invest, you compete. But comparing this to Sir Alex Ferguson's feat, I think would be sacrilegious. I think it would be, out of either not lack of proper understanding, but there is no proper way you can convince anyone that this treble won by Manchester City, with all due respect, is anywhere close to Sir Alex Ferguson. And no wonder like I said, no wonder the Queen saw it fitting that Sir Alex Ferguson became the first manager, the first Manchester United manager, and the last manager of Manchester United, first of all to win a treble, but also to be knighted by the Queen of England. And do I think it's going to happen with Pep Guardiola? I would be surprised if it happened. I don't think it's going to happen, but you can give me your opinion about that. But that is the situation with Manchester United and the treble. So the verdict, I think, is known now, that the treble and comparison, I think it's wrong. Thank you. My name is Webb. This is the Hotspot. Like I said, this was going to be a long video, but it was about trying to give a proper comparison of the two. The king of trebles, the bigger treble, the better treble, was the one won by Manchester United in 1999, where this man became the David Beckham who bends it like no one else. But also, United became the kings of comebacks, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer proved to us how important substitutes can be, as he probably scored the most impactful goals for United en route winning that treble. My name is Webb. This is the Hot